this is Active PC Guy, and this video will be going on about building your own computer. This goes about building your own computer piece by piece as opposed to ordering it as a whole. You might find good deals ordering it as a whole, you might not, but as a rule of thumb, you always have to pay a bit more by ordering a pre-built PC because obviously you have to pay for the people putting it together, the shopping personnel, let's say. You pay a fee, let's call it, for it to sit on a storage or a shelf or whatever. So usually it ends up being cheaper to build your own. Now, a lot of people might think that it costs a lot to build a PC that you can use for gaming. In a way, that is true. Prices are more expensive than ever if you are looking at the higher end computer geared towards gaming enthusiasts and performance nuts. But to build a reasonably affordable gaming PC, it's not all that horrible. And I will give you a few examples based on a few price points. And these builds are purely an example. It's not a recommendation, you should get this, should get that. It's basically just an example of the prices in different price points and what you can expect for. I will do three examples which are beginner level, intermediate level for the average user, and then a PC enthusiast level with basically the top of the line options for each component. And I will begin now with the beginner level example. This is geared towards people that need a computer. They might play a little bit, but they're not going to be playing the latest of the latest games on high settings. People that don't have a lot to spend. Let's say that your kid is getting to that age that he needs a computer, and you know that he's going to play because kids are going to play games with each other and all that, and you want him to have that sort of interaction, and you want to get him a computer, but you don't want to spend a lot because you don't have all that much to spare, or because yeah, it's his first PC, he doesn't need top of the line stuff anyway. And I will let you see the various examples that I have set up for this scenario. When putting together a computer build, I always recommend starting with the main pieces, the pieces that have to be compatible with each other and are also usually the most pricey. That goes for motherboard, CPU, RAM, and the graphics card in this case because there might be some gaming involved. So starting with the CPU, because it is one of the pricier pieces, and you have to be sure that it's compatible with the motherboard. I chose this one as an example. It's a bit of an older generation, but it's still good. It will set you back about 200 euros. Now, there's cheaper ones out there as well, but I try to keep it somewhat functional, somewhat of a good quality and good performance for the price, while still supporting reasonably current games. Now, after this whole clicking mess, let's see, it has a clock frequency of 3.4. That's not horrible actually for an older generation, and for this price, it's actually quite decent. You will be able to play games on reasonable settings. You're not going to be able to do it all on max on AAA games, but that's not the point of this PC to begin with. It's to be usable, to be able to do a multitude of things, to be able to play games, but as I said, don't expect max settings, don't expect everything to be super smooth. But it's perfectly doable to play stuff with your friends if you're on minimum. Like I said, 3.4 GHz base frequency, 4 cores. This socket is actually still recent and still supported. So if you wanted to upgrade later on, you could. Um, it will need 65 watts from the power supply. Integrated graphics, no one really cares about if you get your own graphics card, to be honest. No hyper-threading, but then again it has 4 cores. For beginner level, it is very, very reasonable. It comes with a included fan if you get the boxed version, so you don't have to worry about that. Then again, here you are, 220 euros for the processor. Now for the motherboards. You have several options here that support the socket. I specifically filter them by socket and by increasing price. You have a lot of options, ATX, micro ATX. This relates to the size of the motherboard itself, its physical size, and if it fits in a case or not. You have many options, as you can see, starting at 40 euros, going all the way to the hundreds. But for the sake of this example, I will average out the price to, let's say, 60 euros in case you are looking for one with specific features or specific size and form factor. I will average it out to 60 euros for, well, let's say accounting purposes. Now, after the motherboard, you're going to need RAM. Those motherboards, the ones I have checked, I did not check all of them because as you saw it was an enormous list, but the ones I checked asked for DDR4 RAM. Um, this RAM is a bit faster than DDR3, which is good, and it's still not super expensive. Now, for a computer in this build range, you probably want 8 gigabytes of RAM, so let's say that you get two 4 gigabyte sticks, 32 euros each. That will be, I'll ever round it up to 70 euros for a ham then. Now, after that, you're going to need a power supply, and using the calculator that I have featured before in my previous videos, it adds it up to 495 watts. Now, you can get a 550 watts, or you can get a 650 watts with an eye already to future upgrades. In this case, if you are trying to keep it cheap, go for a 550 watts. You have several options. 80 plus gold, it's pretty decent. 5500 watts, 550 watts, 80 plus bronze, 50 euros. Let's sort them by price. This is obviously not set up correctly. So let's see if I do a range between 500 and 600. These are a bit too crappy. Like I said with the power supplies, try to keep it to a somewhat reputable manufacturer. So my first advice in this range would be Silverstone is good, Cooler Master is good. Let's scroll down a bit more. Antec is also pretty reasonable. Corsair is also good. This is the first. No, it's not. Sorry. Gigabyte also good. Now this is the first option that catches my eye as far as quality and price relationship. 45 euros for a power supply. But I had it open and I forgot to show it. You also need a graphics card if you're planning to do any sort of gaming, and this seems to be a good option in terms of for this price range. I mean, 149 euros for a GTX 770. You might be able to find 780 or an 86 yeah, 770 Ti. Depends on the deals that you can find. It's difficult to find these cards sometimes because they are a bit older. But if you cannot find a 770, you can go for example, let's see, GTX 1050. It's actually a better option. It's actually what I'm going to. I might also add that I'm not going to be counting things like a monitor or a keyboard or a mouse for the purposes of calculating the costs because these things, there's a lot of options out there. They are very varied and you can choose one to your personal preferences. Keyboards are really cheap, mice are really cheap if you're going for the basic ones, and also monitors, you can easily get a second-hand one for 20, 30 euros, I'm sure, perhaps even less if you're not picky. And it's a very personal choice what kind of size you want and all that sort of stuff. So I will leave that to your own consideration, and that is not included in the total price calculation. So that brings the price up to 558 euros. Obviously, I did not include the peripherals like the mouse and the keyboard and monitor. Expect to spend another 20 euros on a computer case, another maybe 20 on a CD drive. You obviously will need hard drives, so another, let's say, 40 for a hard drive and another 40 for an SSD if you want one or not. That's optional, and that will obviously reflect on the price. So that brings the price of our beginner level build to 618 or 620 for short euros. That does not include an SSD, so if you want to go with an SSD for some improved speed on your main drive, let's make it 650 because there's cheap SSDs out there. That's a pretty reasonable entry level build. You can go cheaper. I try to keep it I try to keep the performance reasonable for the today's standards while trying to keep it as cheap as possible. You can probably go a little bit cheaper. You can probably find deals and sales. You can get stuff secondhand, obviously, that's always an option. But as far as new goes, this is the price that you can expect for a basic entry-level gaming computer. Not a normal computer, let's just for browsing the internet and whatnot, but for a gaming computer, this is the entry level price that you can expect. You can perhaps get deals off and downgrade a bit on some parts like the CPU and the graphics card, and it will probably bring you down for from 600 and something to the 500 range, but it's about what you can expect. Now for the next level, the intermediate level. That is for someone that, let's say you have a job, you like gaming, but you don't want to spend thousands and thousands of your computer. So you want something that's good, that can play on good settings, that can last for a while. And let's set a maximum budget for this computer. Let's say that you want to spend about 1,000 euros on your computer, give or take. And like I said, you want to play games, you want to be able to play decent and recent games, play online, all that sort of stuff. Well, let's see what we can do with that amount of money. As before, we are going to start with the CPU, the motherboard, and the graphics card to our medium build computer that is aimed at people wanting to play more recent games, expecting it to last for a longer while, and just generally being more powerful and higher settings and all that stuff. Now, starting with the CPU, we have an i5-86K that is a bit more recent, a bit more powerful. It has more cores. It's just in general, a better computer, more recent. It is launched on 6 October 2017, so that's barely a year old, and it's of a higher tier than our 75K that we previously showed on the beginner build. It's also a bit more expensive, but it goes on the same socket. So if you are looking to upgrade, it goes on the same socket anyway. And also, it is the same socket that the most recent CPUs use, the ninth generation CPUs from Intel that just launched. So if you would in the future want to upgrade, you just have to make sure that you have a graphics card that supports it, such as this one, for example, that will set you back about 95 euros. There's a lot of different models of the Z370 family. As you can see, this is the starting one going all the way up. So for this, I'm going to be assuming a 120 value for this because you might want a different model, different form factor, all that. You can snoop around and check what you can find. Anyway, I will assume 120 value. It is compatible with the previously shown CPU and the most recent ones, and has plenty of other functions. It's a very recent motherboard as well. It is uh, launched also 7 October, so together with the other CPU, as you can see, and it is a very good option, very recent, very powerful. So yeah, that is it for motherboard, and again, it also requires DDR4. Now, DDR4, you can use the exact same sticks as you would use in the previous build, but you probably, if you're going to be gaming and all that, you probably want a bit more RAM since it's a more powerful PC anyway. So let's go with 4 sticks in place of 2 sticks for a total of 16 gigabytes of RAM, and let's put the price of that at the 140 euro mark. Now for graphics cards. Again, you probably want a slightly better one. Here is the 1060 family. Now, the cheaper ones will be 250. There's more expensive ones if you go for other brands and other types of coolers and all that. I will set the price at 260 since it is what is to be expected, plus shipping and all that stuff if applicable. So that is it then. It's a better graphics card than the previous build. You can also go higher if you want to spend a bit more. It's all up to you. Now, as far as power consumption goes, Here you will probably want a 650 watt at least power supply. And looking at the list, this is the first one that catches my eye, the cheapest one that catches my eye, I should add. It's semi-modular, so you cannot get all the cables unplugged if need be, but the ones that are not modular are the essential ones, like the motherboard and CPU ones that the computer absolutely needs. So it's still pretty acceptable. 660 watts, 80 plus bronze. It's not the best, but then again, we're trying to keep it reasonable. It is not the best possible option, but it is a very good quality power supply because Cooler Master is a good brand and it will fulfill your needs. So there you go, 70 euros for a power supply. Again, as before, you will need an SSD, you will need a hard drive, you will need a case. So I will be assuming about a 40 euro cost for an SSD and a 40 euro cost for a hard drive. Although you might want a bigger hard drive if you're going to be using your PC a bit more seriously. So let's make it 60 so you can get a bit more space. Now this leaves you at 966 euros. That leaves you 34 euros to find a case. Uh, There are plenty of reasonable cases out there for this price. Myself, my first case before I built my desk was a Sharkoon VG4W, something like that case. It's very nice. It's good enough. It does not support water cooling or anything. But anyway, point being, you can get very reasonable cases on the 30-40 euro range. Although you might as well go a bit higher if you are okay with going a bit over budget. But the 34 euro target that I just set is just so it falls within the 1000 euro budget that I set for this build. There's always going to be unpredictable occurrences. You might get a sale that brings the value down on some other part, so you get more money to spare on something else. So yeah, maybe you can get a better case, maybe you can get a bigger hard drive or something like that. It's up to you. Anyway, the computer that this build would produce would be very reasonable. It would be able to play most modern games on reasonable settings. So I mean above minimum, but also not at max. You should not have issues with it. It's all compatible, and it should be easy to upgrade if you would like to in the future. Now, for the more hardcore PC users or PC enthusiasts, there is always the highest end options. Now that is where it gets expensive. If you have not been following the latest releases, the prices have been climbing and climbing like crazy over the past few years, and for most people our incomes have not. So it is a more and more expensive business to have a really high-end top of the line PC and all the extras that come with it, because you're probably going to want to water cool it, you're going to want a very good case, and all that sort of stuff. So let's see just exactly a high-end PC, highest end PC, I might say, would set you back. So as before, let's start with the CPU. This is the highest Intel CPU right now. It was released just a couple of weeks ago. The i9 9900K for 600 euros. It is a beast of a processor, I'm not saying otherwise, but the price is just insane. And I know there is a 97K one that is slightly worse, but still very respectable, and it's about 100 euros cheaper. But the goal of this build is to be the best of the best, so we are going to go with this. Now, for this process, for this processor, you will need a motherboard, obviously. Now, the Z370s from our previous build are compatible with this one, so you could use them in theory, but there also are Z390 motherboards that came out specially for this processor. So here they are. They are anywhere from 169 to the 244, 286 for the sake of averaging out in case you need a specific form factor or a specific brand. I will say about 200, 200 and something for this motherboard. Now, this is where it gets even funnier. Graphics cards. Here we have graphics cards, the RTX 2080 Ti that just came out from Nvidia. 1400 euros, 1350, 1.3 thousand. So yeah, let's call it 1.3 thousand if you don't want a specific one from another brand, because this seems to be the average. There's a bit cheaper ones, but on average 1.3 thousand we shall call it for one graphics card, which is not even that much of an upgrade over the previous generation. It's a bit ridiculous. It is a beast of a card, it's the best out there, that's all true, but it's perhaps uh, it's not a 80% upgrade as we have sometimes seen in previous generation jumps. This is not it. It's completely overpriced if you ask me, but it is what it is. We don't make the prices, and there are not a lot of other options out there. There's other manufacturers that are not Nvidia, but and some of them are good, but in general they are not as good. So this is what happens when you have a monopoly of the market. Same with Intel and the pricing of their CPUs, really. But that's a story for another time. Now, as for RAM, you will want more, or at least better RAM, as in better speed and lower latency. So let's call it 200 euros for the RAM. As far as power supply goes, you will probably also want a bit of a stronger one, since you are most likely going to want to overclock, and these parts require more power to begin with because they're higher end parts. So anywhere from, I did not run the calculator, but call it 150 to 1000. Let's call it 160 euros in general. Now, you will also want an M2 SSD most likely if you're going for the highest end of the highest ends, and those will set you back, let's call it on average around 100, depending on the size that you want. You might want an actual SSD or not as well, just because why not, I guess. Or you might skip that one completely. I will say about 80 euros for an SSD in this case, because you probably want a bit of a bigger one as well. You also probably want a big hard drive because you probably have a lot of stuff to store there with all the gaming and videos and all the stuff that you're gonna do. So let's call also like another 80 euros for a hard drive. And then there's more. You obviously will also need a case, but what's the point of all that shiny, nice hardware that if you cannot show it off? You'll probably want a pretty good case, if not to build your own. So be looking at spending anywhere from 100 to 200 for a case, but most models of the most popular good high-end cases are around 100 and something. So let's say 120 on average. That's not too horrible. No. And yeah, after that, you might want LED lights. You might want water cooling. You probably want water cooling if you're going to overclock and bring the most out of your PC. So water cooling, that's going to be costly. You're going to need radiators, you're going to need tubes, fittings, the fluid, all that stuff, and you're going to need to know what you're doing. But in any case, it's expensive business. I have not calculated it myself how much it's going to cost, but let's set aside a good 500 euros for the water cooling itself, just for the water cooling. And without water cooling, this build is already at the 2.8 something thousand euros. With water cooling, it's going to rocket it up to the 3.3 thousand ish, give or take. Uh, so yeah, that is the price of a super high-end PC. This is a PC that will probably last you years to come. It will probably play everything out there on the highest possible settings. But is it worth the price? Unless you are a very fanatic enthusiast, I don't think so, because you can get a computer for half this price. You can get a very good computer for, let's say, 1.3, 1.4 thousand euros, and it will perform just a notch lower. You'll still be able to play with games on max settings, but you won't be able to play them on a Super HD TV like 4K resolution. Well, I mean, play it on a slightly smaller screen, with slightly smaller resolution. You will still have very good frame rates then. So again, I'm not judging anyone because trust me, if I had the spare money to build a PC like this, I mean, I do have the money to build a PC like this, but I don't want to break the bank for it, so to speak. There's other things that I need to think about, like, rent, getting a car, because mine is about to die, and that sort of stuff. Um, but yeah, if I had the extra money that I could just throw around, I would throw it at this. I would definitely build a PC like this. So I'm definitely not judging anyone and saying that it's a waste of money because I would do the exact same if I could. But it is a waste of money in the perspective that you can spend less than half and have a computer that performs just a bit worse. Now, it is a very big difference if you're all about the performance, but for a general user, if you're playing a game, if you have it on max settings or if you have it at just a tiny notch below max settings, visually you're not going to notice a difference and you're not going to notice a difference in the FPS. So is it worth it for someone that actually has to think about the budget to aim for this? It's not. It's not. But again, it is if you're passionate about this kind of technology, it is an amazing thing to have, and I would definitely go for it if I could, and if I ever can, trust me, I definitely will be all over it. So yeah, this is what you can expect as far as building computers on different levels of budget and commitment, let's call it. You can get a very decent computer for 1,000 euros or below. You can get a very good starter computer for 600 or below. And if you're going all out, expect to spend thousands because mostly GPU and CPU are completely overpriced these days, mostly because of market monopoly. That's what it boils down to. I will be available to help anyone with questions if they are thinking to build their computer, or what should I go with? Is this going to be good enough or not? If anyone wants to just message me or something like that, I'll be open to any questions. I'm also open for feedback and suggestions of what do you guys want to see in this channel, what is your favorite type of content, and what should I aim for. So let me know. I hope this has been helpful and informative. I'm Attic PC Guy, and I'll see you next time.